Isaiah 29. Another woe. Woe to you, Ariel, Ariel, the city where David settled. I don't know exactly what Ariel means. I read some commentaries that refers to like an altar heath or something like that. I'm not really sure. But we're talking about Jerusalem here. David's city is Jerusalem. And year to year, so we talked about Ephraim to begin with, and then in chapter 28, and then we switched the focus down to people in Jerusalem in verse 14 and 28. So now we're saying woe to Jerusalem in verse chapter 29. Remember, the original text would not have had chapters and verses in it, so we switched the focus from talking about Ephraim or to Ephraim to talking to Jerusalem, and now we're saying woe to Jerusalem. The city where David settled. Add year to year, and let your cycle of festivals go on. Yet I will besiege Ariel. She lurks in Jerusalem again. She will mourn and lament. She will be to me like an altar hearth. Now there's a footnote down here saying the Hebrew for altar hearth sounds like the Hebrew for Ariel. So I guess is why they're using that word here. Remember, the Hebrew has a lot of word plays and puns in it that, of course, are totally lost when you translate it into the other languages. The primary source of humor in the Bible comes from word plays and puns. One of the reasons why the Bible seems so humorless is because the main source of humor in it is word plays and puns, and those don't translate into other languages. So when we read it in English, we don't get any of that. I will encamp against you all around. This is obviously referring to the Assyrian siege of Jerusalem, which happened in 701 BC. I will encamp against you all around. I will encircle you with towers, and set up my siege works against you. So he's calling these siege works, but the Assyrians actually are going to build his siege works. God takes credit for them being his. Brought low, you will speak from the ground. Your speech will mumble out of the dust. Your voice will come ghost-like from the earth. Out of the dust your speech will whisper. I don't know if this was referring to them dying or them just being very humiliated, or both, possibly. But your many enemies, because it's not just going to be Assyria, it's going to be Assyria and some of its eastern allies, like the Elamites and the Medes, which we talked about when we read the oracles against Babylon, and the trouble they're going to have with Assyria. And how it's going to be not just Assyria, but Assyria and some of its own allies. So you're going to have Assyrians and their allies there against you. But your many enemies will become like fine dust, the ruthless hordes like blown chaff. When they would thresh their wheat, they would throw it up in the air and let the wind. They would do it like in a pit or a valley where there was a strong breeze. And they would take these threshing shovels and they would throw it up in the air and let the breeze catch the lighter chaff and blow it away, and then the heavier kernels, which they actually wanted to keep, would fall to the ground, and they would gather them up and use those. So the chaff is the stuff that blows away in the wind. Suddenly, in an instant, the Lord Almighty will come with thunder and earthquake and great noise, with windstorm and tempest and flames of a devouring fire. This is a whole lot like when God came to Mount Sinai, when they were camped at Mount Sinai back in the early days, right after they got out of Egypt. Let's see here, chapter 19. Exodus 19, let's see here. So they have Exodus 19 verse 1, it says, in the third month after the Israelites left Egypt, on the very day they came to the desert of Sinai. And Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain. So Moses goes up to the mountain and he speaks with God. He goes back and speaks to the people on behalf of God. He says, the Lord says in verse 9, I'm going to come to you in a dense cloud. To be careful that you don't go up on the mountain or touch the foot of it, Whoever touches it will surely be put to death, even if it's an animal. On the verse 16, on the morning of the third day, there was thunder and lightning, with a thick cloud over the mountain, and a very loud trumpet blast. Everyone in the camp trembled. Moses led the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Mount Sinai was covered with smoke, because the Lord descended on it in fire. The smoke billowed up from it like smoke from a furnace. The whole mountain trembled violently, and the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder. Then Moses spoke, and the voice of God answered him. So that's the imagery. God is coming here. He came to the mountain to meet with the Israelites at Mount Sinai. And everyone trembled, and he's coming here. And suddenly, in an instant, the Lord Almighty will come, with thunder and earthquake and great noise, with windstorm and tempest, and flames of a devouring fire. Then the hordes of all the nations that fight against Ariel, so Assyria and all of its allies, that attack her and her fortress and besiege her, will be as it is with a dream, with a vision in the night, as when a hungry man dreams that he is eating, but he awakes, and his hunger remains. As when a thirsty man dreams that he is drinking, but he awakes, with his thirst unquenched. He awakens faint, with his thirst unquenched. So will it be with the hordes of all the nations that fight against Mount Zion. Be stunned and amazed. Blind yourselves and be sightless. Be drunk, but not from wine. Stagger, but not from beer. The Lord has brought over you a deep sleep. He has sealed your eyes, the prophets. He has covered your heads, the seers. So the prophets and the priests that we got done condemning a little while ago, who were staggering, they're going to be forced into a stupor from what the Lord is going to do. For you, this whole vision is nothing but words sealed in a scroll. It's nothing. You can't understand it, interpret it, or explain it to anybody. And if you give the scroll to someone who can read, and say to him, "Read this, please," he will answer, "I can't. It's sealed." Or if you give the scroll to someone who cannot read and say, "Read this, please," he will answer, "I don't know how to read." So whether whether you know what you're supposed to be saying and just don't do it, or you do know what you're supposed to be saying and you don't do it anyway, these are people who have been made ignorant of what they should know, made ignorant of the word that they should be aware of. The Lord says, "These people come near to me with their mouths, and they honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship of me is made up only of rules taught by men." Or, according to the footnote down here, it could read, "They worship me in vain, their teachings are but rules taught by men." And this could be a reference to that revival that Hezekiah was trying to put in place. You read about that. That would have happened by now, probably. Probably that would have already happened by this point, where Hezekiah tried to get the people to go back to God, and they did go to the country, they did go to the capital, and they did do the things they're supposed to do. Maybe they didn't do it all the way, maybe they didn't let it go all the way into their souls. I don't know, I really don't. Therefore, once more I will astound these people with wonder upon wonder. The wisdom of the wise will perish, the intelligence of the intelligent will vanish. Now, God does this all the time throughout history. Paul talked about this in 1 Corinthians. Let's see if we can get the exact quote here. Early in 1 Corinthians. Let's see here. Chapter 1. Chapter 1, verse 20. Where is the wise man? Where is the scholar? Where is the philosopher of this age? Now, Paul would have been familiar with the Greek tradition of wisdom and philosophy. He knew very well how the Greeks like to sit around and talk about ideas. Has God not made foolish the wisdom of the world? For For since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not know him, God was pleased through the foolishness of what was preached to save those who believe. In verse 25 he says, for the foolishness of God is wiser than man's wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than man's strength. It's stronger than man's strength. But in verse 27 he says, God chose the foolish things of this world to shame the wise, and he chose the weak things of this world to shame the strong. God always puts human intelligence and wisdom to shame when that intelligence and wisdom is used against him. He's doing it here in this day and time too. He's doing it in our day and time too. We have a lot of people who think they're very smart, who are acting very, very stupid right now. And that's only going to continue. As we see clearly laid out, the pattern of human nature over and over again in history, as recorded in this Bible, and even in our own experiences, people aren't going to change. Okay, it's like they're only going to get more stubborn and obstinate with this. We went from putting our faith in masks to save us from COVID. Now we're saying crazy things like men can get pregnant. And we're doing this completely seriously, meaning it totally seriously, acting as though it's just a thing that we should all believe and accept. And it's crazy, it's insane, it's foolish. But it's what we think. This is what we think is wise. We have come up with this as our form of intelligence now. It's being shamed, but we don't want to accept that, so we're just going to continue doubling down on it. I guarantee you it's only going to get crazier from here. Because that's how human history always is. That's what human nature always does. Woe to those who go to great depths to hide their plans from the Lord, who do their work in darkness and think, who sees us? Who will know? You turn things upside down, as if the potter were thought to be like the clay. So you think you can put one over on God. You think you can hide it. You think you can get away with it. You think that God doesn't see, that God doesn't know. So what is formed, say to him who formed it, he didn't make me. Can the pot say of the potter, he knows nothing? Paul will talk about this in Romans as well. This is tough to accept. I'd like to think, for example, that I can decide my own nature. I'd like to think that. But I can't. I went through a period of time where I really had a hard time with that when I was younger. We'd all like to think that. We'd all ultimately like to be God. We'd all like to be the potter. We would all ultimately like to be God. We'd like to be able to make our own rules. In the end, though, we cannot do that. I did not make myself. I did not will myself into being. I cannot unmake myself either. Even if I were to kill myself, commit suicide, I would not unmake my existence. I can't do that. I'll never be able to do that. I never will be able to make myself or unmake myself. In the end, that alone shows that I don't have the kind of control that I'd like to have. I can't make myself, I can't unmake myself, I can't make anything else, I can't unmake anything else. In the end, I can't do very much. I'm actually pretty limited in what I could do, and we're all that way. I accepted this back when I was about 30 years old. It took a while. I had to fight this. This was a battle for me back when I was in my 20s. I had to accept that I wasn't the potter, that I was the pot. And I'm not saying that I, even to this day, don't have my moments where I like to be the potter, because I do. But that's something that we all have to accept about ourselves. None of us are the potter as we'd like to think that we are. So what is formed, say to him who formed it, he didn't make me. Can the pot say of the potter, he knows nothing? In a very short time, will not Lebanon be turned into a fertile field, and the fertile field seem like a forest? Now Lebanon was a forest. It was not a fertile field. So he's saying, will it not be turned into something other than what it is currently? In that day, the deaf will hear the word of the scroll, and out of gloom and darkness the eyes of the blind will see. Once more the humble, so that scroll that's been sealed, due to our stubbornness and our desire to not believe it, is going to be opened up, and we're going to hear it, we're going to understand it. Once more the humble will rejoice in the Lord. The needy will rejoice in the Holy One of Israel. The ruthless will vanish. The mockers will disappear. So those guys who were mocking Isaiah's message are going to be gone. You know what? They have gone. I don't know who any of those guys were. I know who Isaiah was. Isaiah has a long book in the Bible that's positioned smack in the middle of this thing. Look at that. If you look at the way we have it bound in our copies today, it's pretty much exactly halfway through it. It's a long book, smack in the middle. If you were to open up the Bible, if you were to kind of like put it on its spine like this and just let it fall open, chances are very good that it would open to a page somewhere in Isaiah. But these people that Isaiah was talking about, these people who were making fun of him and mocking his message earlier in chapter 28, I have no idea who they were. I don't know any of their names. I don't even know their message. We mock them by making them speak in gibberish and childish words. They're gone. They've disappeared. They've vanished. But Isaiah's words remain. The ruthless will vanish. The mockers will disappear. And all who have an eye for evil will be cut down. Those who with a word make a man out to be guilty, who ensnare the defender in court, and with false testimony deprive the innocent of justice. Therefore, this is what the Lord... Now, these are the sorts of people today that want to cancel people for having a wrong opinion. That's what I think of today when I hear that. The sorts of people who want to cancel you for saying that you don't think men can get pregnant. That's a big one to me. I was reading this on July 20th, 2022. And for some reason, this summer, and recently, it's been building for a little while, but this is a new phenomenon. We have just decided that we think men can get pregnant, and if anyone suggests otherwise, that person is a terrible person and needs to be silenced and canceled. That's just where we are in our national discourse today. Therefore, and that makes me think a lot of the people that Isaiah is talking about here, people who are speaking complete nonsense and gibberish, and who try to speak a word to make a man out to be guilty for simply saying something against them, and who will someday disappear. Therefore, this is what the Lord, who redeemed Abraham, says to the house of Jacob. No longer will Jacob be ashamed. No longer will their faces grow pale. When they see among them their children, the work of my hands, they will keep my name holy. They will acknowledge the holiness of the Holy One of Jacob. It's another way of saying the Holy One of Israel, because Jacob and Israel are the same thing. And will stand in awe of the God of Israel. Those who are wayward in spirit will gain understanding, and those who complain will accept instruction.